Everyone told me it was just an accident, but I found the paperwork that proves otherwise. Now I can't unsee it and I can't forgive them. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. My cousin walked up to me at the family barbecue, squinting like he'd just seen a ghost. "Why are you wearing white after Labor Day?" I laughed, thinking he was just messing with me. "Since when do you care about fashion rules?" But Paul didn't laugh. His face drained of color, and his eyes kept darting around the yard like he was looking for backup. Before I could ask what was wrong, Aunt Paige rushed over, actually ran and crushed me in this suffocating hug. Her voice shook against my ear. "Not this. Not today." I froze. Over her shoulder, I saw Uncle Ted fumbling for his phone, his hands trembling. My grandmother stopped mid-sentence with the neighbors and collapsed into a lawn chair, wiping away tears. "Aunt Paige, you're scaring me," I stammered, trying to pull away. But she only gripped me tighter, like if she let go I'd vanish. That's when I realized everyone was staring. My cousin Sienna, the queen of sarcastic remarks about my clothes, had mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her brother Jake shuffled closer, clutching a plate of food with shaking hands. You should eat something," he said softly. "I just ate 20 minutes ago." My voice cracked. "Will someone please tell me what's happening?" That's when my mom appeared at my side. Panic flashed in her eyes as she whispered, "Let's go inside, honey. Find you something else to wear." "Mom, it's just a barbecue. I'm not changing." "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "We need to talk." Then Amy, another cousin, casually slid between me and the pool. She pretended to be adjusting her sunglasses, but I knew she was blocking me. "Are you feeling okay? Like really okay? You're not sad or anything?" The whole family had shifted, slowly surrounding me, forming a barrier between me and the water. Even the ice chests had been moved to the far side of the yard. My head spun. I gripped the picnic table to steady myself, and instantly 6 relatives swarmed me. "She's not well," someone muttered. "I knew this would happen," another voice whispered. Then out of nowhere, Dr. Maya Boo, my mom's friend, appeared with her medical bag. She didn't even ask. Just strapped a blood pressure cuff around my arm. "Let me check your vitals, sweetheart." "I'm fine." I snapped. "I'm just dizzy because everyone's acting insane." But Dr. Maya Boo's expression tightened. "I think we should head to the hospital. Just to be safe." "The hospital? For wearing white?" I demanded. But no one answered. Instead, they practically shoved me toward her car. When we got there, Dr. Maya Boo whispered something to the triage nurse, and suddenly we were whisked straight to the back. No waiting. No questions. Blood tests, heart monitors, endless questions about my mental state. Then a psychiatrist I'd never met walked in, giving me this calm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Dr. Black. I understand you've been under some stress. Have you had any thoughts of hurting yourself?" "What? No. Why would you even ask that?" A nurse chimed in gently while fiddling with an 4-line I didn't even need. Sometimes trauma anniversaries can trigger reactions we don't expect. "Any recent anxiety around water? Pools, beaches, boats?" And then the door burst open. My mom stumbled in, face streaked with tears. She locked eyes with me, trembling. Her voice barely a whisper. "Take it off." "What?" "The dress. Please, baby. Just take off the white dress." "Mom, you're scaring me. What is this about?" Her hands were ice cold as she gripped mine. 40 years ago, my sister Greta drowned at our Labor Day picnic. She was 6. And she was wearing her favorite white dress. My chest tightened. "I've never heard of Greta." Her voice cracked. "I was 8. I was supposed to be watching her, but I got distracted playing with my cousins. She wanted everyone to see her new dress." Those were her last words before she ran to the dock. The room fell silent, except for the hum of machines. Then Mom whispered about Uncle James. How, 5 years later, he wore a white suit to a September wedding, and his boat capsized that same weekend. She broke off, sobbing. "Then what?" I pushed. Her answer hit me like ice water. "Your brother. Igor. He was 8 too. He wore white swim trunks to a pool party in September. He drowned." My stomach dropped. We never talked about Igor's death, just that it was a tragic accident when I was 2. "Mom, no. These are coincidences. Terrible, awful coincidences. Greta didn't drown because of a dress. And Igor didn't die because of colors." Tears blurred her face. "You knew I couldn't handle it. You knew." That's when I snapped. I tore off the hospital blanket, stormed out of the room, and left them all sitting there. For one fleeting second, I felt powerful. But once I was alone, I collapsed into tears. I cried until dawn. And when I finally woke up, my phone was exploding with missed calls and texts. Dozens of them. Some apologizing. Most accusing. My cousins calling me selfish. My aunt saying I'd shamed the family. The worst ones were threats. One uncle wrote that I'd regret this. Another said I needed to be taught a lesson about respect. My hands shook as I took screenshots, just in case. But I couldn't think about it right then, I had to get to work. 2 hours of sleep, swollen eyes, and I dragged myself through a shower before driving on autopilot. The second I walked in, my coworker glanced up. Her face softened immediately. "Are you okay?" "You look," she didn't finish. Instead, she quietly set a coffee on my desk. Then my boss called me into her office. She looked concerned. "Your mom phoned this morning. Said you might be having some kind of breakdown." I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I gave her the PG version, left out the cursed clothes and drowning superstition. Just said my family had trauma around water accidents. She nodded slowly. Grief makes people do strange things, she said gently. Take the rest of the day. And if you need to talk to someone professional, we have an assistance program. I grabbed that lifeline immediately. Back home, I couldn't stop replaying it all in my head, the nurse whispering, the doctor's probing questions, the unnecessary for. And all because I wore a white dress. After Labor Day. That night, I grabbed my phone and scrolled until I landed on Paul's name. Out of everyone, he'd looked more shaken than hostile at the barbecue. Maybe, just maybe, he'd actually talk to me. I sent him a text, can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Just us. Please don't tell the others. His reply came fast. Yes. But can I bring my girlfriend for support? I didn't care. I just needed answers. Sure, I wrote back. Later that evening, I was heating up leftover pizza when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. My stomach dropped. I peeked through the blinds. Uncle Ted's SUV. Sitting right there in my driveway. Both he and Aunt Paige inside, whisper arguing, their eyes darting toward my front door. I froze. Then I killed the lights, crouching low like a fugitive in my own home. For 40 minutes, 40 long minutes, I watched them sit there. No knock. No text. Just watching. By the time they finally drove off, my heart was hammering. I realized something terrifying. I was scared of my own family. The next morning, I called the number my boss had given me, the employee assistance line. A warm-voiced woman answered, asking what kind of help I needed. I told her everything. The drownings. The obsession with white clothes. The hospital ordeal. And you know what? She didn't laugh. She didn't treat me like I was crazy. She said she'd set me up with someone who specialized in family trauma and grief. My first appointment was Thursday afternoon. When the day came, I walked into the therapist's office with knots in my stomach. She was younger than I expected, calm and steady in a way that made me feel less like I was unraveling. She asked what brought me in. And I unloaded everything, the barbecue, the whispers, the hospital, my family acting like I'd cursed them. She listened. Really listened. Then she asked me a simple question, what do you want out of this? The answer hit me, I wanted the truth. The real story behind these deaths. Not superstition. Not whispered family myths. Just facts. And I wanted boundaries, space between me and their panic. She gave me homework. Write down everything I knew about each drowning. Don't judge whether it made sense. Just record it. That weekend I took it further. I drove to the library. Walked up to the reference desk, hands trembling, and asked how to find newspapers from 40 years ago. The librarian smiled kindly and showed me the old microfilm machines. Scrolling through reels of blurry headlines, my breath caught when I saw it. A 6-year-old girl drowned at Pine Lake during a family picnic. Greta. The article was tiny, just a few sentences. She'd wandered away. The adults didn't notice until it was too late. Not a single word about a white dress. No mention of curses. I printed it and stared at the page until my hands shook. Monday morning, I finally worked up the courage to call my grandmother. She answered on the third ring, sounding tired. I asked if we could talk about Greta. The second I said her name, she broke down sobbing. Then the line went dead. 5 minutes later, a text from Mom, you're cruel. Tormenting an old woman like that. You should be ashamed. I threw my phone onto the couch, fighting the guilt clawing at me. But then it buzzed again. A voicemail. Uncle Ted's voice. Weary. Cracked. I'm sorry for sitting in your driveway. I just wanted to check on you. Your mom hasn't slept since Labor Day. We're worried about both of you. I sat there staring at the phone, torn between fear and guilt. The next day at work, I caught my coworker Rita on lunch break. Would you help me dig into this? The drownings? She didn't hesitate. Of course. My sister works at the courthouse, I can get records. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Someone outside the family was willing to help. That Saturday, we camped out in the library. Rita showed me how to scroll through the old microfilm reels, and together we dug up everything. Greta's article had a black and white photo of Pine Lake. Search boats cutting through rough waves. The headline screamed about severe weather warnings ignored that day. We cross-checked the date. The National Weather Service archive showed thunderstorms and dangerous wind conditions. Then we pulled Igor's article. Same thing, flash flood warnings the day he drowned. Uncle James? His boating accident happened during what meteorologists later called a microburst, with winds topping 60 miles an hour. Every single tragedy tied to weather. Not clothes. Not colors. Rita spread the printouts across the table like puzzle pieces. She tapped the headlines one by one. Notice anything? She asked. And that's when it hit me, none of the articles mentioned clothing. Not once. The curse, the obsession with white after Labor Day, it didn't exist anywhere but in my family's story. About a week later, I opened my mailbox and nearly dropped to my knees. A hospital bill. $3,000. Even after insurance. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the itemized list like it was a horror script. Crisis intervention. Psychiatric evaluation, all these charges for services I never needed. Part of me wanted to march straight to my mom's house and slam the bill down in front of her. But instead, I called my insurance company. The woman on the other end actually sounded sympathetic as I explained how my family had shoved me into unnecessary treatment. She said they'd review my appeal, but it could take weeks. Thursday came and I was back in my therapist's office. She asked me to write down any memories I had about Igor's drowning. I was only 2 years old when it happened, but I remembered the heaviness that lingered afterward. Locks suddenly on every outside door. Strict rules about never going near water. My therapist leaned forward and said something that hit me hard. The no white after Labor Day rule wasn't about fashion. It was about control. When tragedy strikes and you can't stop it, sometimes families invent rules, rituals, to make sense of the chaos. Blaming clothes was easier than admitting supervision failed or warnings were ignored. That night, Mom left me a voicemail. 12 minutes long. I couldn't stomach hearing her voice, so I ran it through a transcription app. And what spilled onto the screen was heartbreaking. She rambled about protecting me, about how the curse was real, how she couldn't lose me too. Then it twisted. She accused me of trying to kill myself just to punish her. She said I wore white on purpose to hurt her. Reading it made my chest ache. The next day, Rita came over with her laptop. She'd made a spreadsheet, columns comparing actual newspaper facts against my family's curse stories. One by one, she pointed out the pattern: no life jackets. Ignoring storm warnings. Adults too distracted or too drunk to notice the kids. Every single tragedy had preventable failures. Blaming clothing was just easier. That weekend I dug deeper. I tracked down a name mentioned in one of the old articles, a witness named Archie Abbott. Turns out he still lived near Pine Lake. Saturday morning I knocked on the door of a weathered little house with an overgrown garden. An elderly man answered. I explained who I was, why I needed to understand. He looked uncertain until I said, I just want to help my family heal. Then he let me in. His living room was filled with old photographs, decades frozen in frames. He pulled out a photo album and pointed to a picture of himself younger, standing at Pine Lake. He remembered that day clearly. The weather was terrible, he said. Radio warnings told everyone to stay off the water. Wind was so bad some families left early. But yours stayed. The adults wanted to keep drinking and playing cards. Archie flipped through his album, pulling out yellowed newspaper clippings. One photo showed the dock that day, waves crashing so hard they sprayed 20 feet inland. Not a single child in the photo wore a life jacket. He shook his head. Nobody at that picnic knew how to swim. A couple adults did, but they were drunk. When Greta wandered to the dock, your mom was playing tag. The grown-ups had their backs turned, card table set up facing away from the water. He paused, his voice low. No one saw her slip. No one heard her hit the water over the wind. By the time they noticed, 10 minutes had passed. The white dress only mattered because it made her easier to spot when they pulled her out. My stomach turned. It had been preventable. All of it. I thanked Archie and drove home in silence, feeling sick. The next morning, I called the hospital records department and requested my files from the Labor Day incident. They told me it'd take a few days. While I waited, I dug into Uncle James's accident. His obituary from 15 years ago painted a vague picture, celebrating a promotion on a boat, accident under investigation. But the phrasing made me suspicious. The Coast Guard was mentioned. So I filed a Freedom of Information request. 3 days later, the hospital called. My records were ready. I sat in my car flipping through 20 pages of notes. Right there on page 1, patient denies suicidal ideation. Appears calm and oriented. Family insisted on evaluation based on clothing choice and date. The psychiatrist's notes were even clearer, no evidence of depression or self-harm. Patient confused by family's reaction. I made copies, sent them to my therapist, and tucked the originals into a folder at home. 2 weeks later, an envelope from the Coast Guard arrived. Uncle James's full accident report. I spread the papers across my kitchen table. The truth was ugly. The boat was carrying 8 people when it was rated for 6. Nobody wore life jackets. The operator's blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. The Weather Service had issued small craft warnings, 6-foot swells, 20-knot winds, and they ignored them. And yet, somehow, my family had passed down a story about white suits. White at a wedding equals death at sea. No. It was drunk boating in a storm. Plain and simple. Reading witness statements about reckless maneuvers, ignored safety flags, I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. My family's superstition was nothing more than denial polished into a myth. I stacked the evidence neatly and picked up my phone. My hands trembled as I dialed Mom. She answered on the second ring, voice exhausted. I told her I had proof. That the curse wasn't real. That every tragedy tied back to weather, alcohol, or lack of safety precautions. Her response? She screamed. Called me a traitor. Said I was dishonoring the dead. I kept my voice calm. The real dishonor is ignoring the truth. It wasn't clothes, Mom. It was choices. She broke down sobbing, accusing me of wanting her to suffer. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't listen to this anymore. Then I hung up. Minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. Mom had blasted the family group chat, accusing me of spreading lies and erasing Greta, James, and Igor. Some relatives piled on, calling me cruel. But then, Amy spoke up. Maybe it's time we talk about this openly. Jake agreed. Paul chimed in, admitting the clothing rule had caused fear for years. And just like that, the chat erupted. Arguments. Accusations. People choosing sides. My phone buzzed again. A private message from Amy, I'm proud of you. I've suspected the truth for years, but I was never brave enough to say it. More private messages followed. Some angry. Others thanking me. The family was splitting down the middle. But for the first time we were talking. Not about curses. Not about colors. About the truth. Thursday's therapy session could not come soon enough. I walked in braced for impact, and my therapist slid a notepad toward me like we were gearing up for a rehearsal. We practiced scripts, actual lines, for when relatives tried to guilt-trip me or pick a fight. Different scenarios, different calm answers. She kept reminding me, you can't control their reactions, only your responses. We talked about how to keep ties with the relatives who were open to change, and how to protect myself from the ones who weren't. Her homework for me: give my attention to the people who'd reached out kindly and give everyone else time to process. The following week she suggested a grief support group. I almost bailed at the door of the community center, but the group leader welcomed me in like I'd been expected. Story after story rolled out, families building rigid rules after someone died, clinging to them like life rafts that didn't actually float. One woman said her family banned swimming after her uncle drowned. Now the kids were scared of bathtubs. A man shared how his family canceled birthdays after his sister died at a party. Every cake turned into a memorial. A couple said their relatives refused to drive on highways after a crash, adding hours to every trip. The leader put it plainly: rules can give the illusion of control when tragedy feels random. Hearing other people describe my life with different details made me feel less alone. Meanwhile, Rita's sister had been neck-deep in court records and turned up a bombshell about Igor's death. She handed me a manila folder, a civil settlement between my parents and the pool owner's insurance. No fence around the pool. No shallow end markers. A teenage lifeguard texting instead of watching swimmers. My parents had received a $$100,000 settlement 8 years ago and never told me. The paper spelled out negligence in black and white, nothing about white swim trunks or curses. That afternoon, a handwriting wobbly envelope arrived from my grandmother, no return address. Inside was a short note. She couldn't talk about Greta, but she understood I needed answers. She'd included a photo from that Labor Day. My heart stalled. Greta's dress was white, with pink flowers. Not the pure white our family always swore she'd worn. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the picture, then snapped a photo of it on my phone and tucked the original back into the envelope like it could break. Monday hit me like a truck. I dragged myself to work. My coworker took one look and asked if I was okay. I muttered something about family stuff. 10 minutes later my boss called me in, shut the door, and gently told me Mom had been calling the office every single day since the barbecue, sometimes 3 or 4 times, asking if I was suicidal or having a breakdown. The receptionist had started screening her, but Mom kept spoofing numbers. HR wanted documentation that I was stable or they'd have to put me on leave. My face burned. I showed my boss texts confirming my therapy appointments and that I wasn't in crisis. She copied everything, promised HR would block Mom's number from the main line, and offered to flex my schedule so I could attend therapy without burning sick days. I thanked her, then stared at spreadsheets the rest of the afternoon without processing a single cell. Thursday rolled around with a new plan. My therapist said the hospital fiasco had carved out a fresh fear of water in me. I'd noticed it, tensing up by the office water cooler, skirting the bathroom because the flush sounded like a wave. So, exposure therapy. We started at the park across the street with a tall fountain spraying 10 feet in the air. We sat 20 feet away while I breathed through the urge to bolt. Every few minutes I scooted 5 feet closer. Eventually I sat at the edge, mist cooling my cheeks. It felt ridiculous, and also like I'd reclaimed something tiny but important. Next session I put my hand into the fountain and counted to 30. After that we sat in the bleachers at the community pool watching little kids take swim lessons. By the 3rd week I could stand at the pool's edge without my heart stampeding. Rita was a rock through all of it: daily check-ins, surprise dinners when I forgot to eat. One Saturday she asked if I wanted to go somewhere I'd been avoiding. Pine Lake was 40 minutes away, the car ride was quiet. The lot was nearly empty, summer had faded. We walked to the dock. It was shockingly narrow, maybe 3 feet across, with gaps between the planks big enough for a child's foot to slip. No barrier, no rope, just wood and deep water. I stood there for 20 minutes, staring into the dark green and thinking about an aunt I'd never met. Rita didn't push. I whispered, "Goodbye, Greta," and promised I'd help heal our family the right way. On the drive back, Rita mentioned her mom had old photos in storage and she'd been digitizing them. There was an entire album from that Labor Day 40 years ago. Her mom had been friends with my grandmother and took pictures at every gathering. She emailed them to me that night. 15 shots. Adults with beers, kids sprinting past with hot dogs. One photo, judging by shadows around noon, showed Greta in blue shorts and a striped shirt at the picnic table, paper plate in hand. Another from mid-afternoon showed the same outfit, laughing with other kids. She'd changed at some point, so the saga about her showing off her white dress all day was made up. My anger thinned into something sadder. Mom had been 8, just a child, watching her 6-year-old sister while the grown-ups played cards and drank. Then Greta drowned, and Mom carried 40 years of blame around like a boulder. The white clothes rule wasn't about safety, it was about control. If she could forbid white after Labor Day, maybe nobody else would die. It was magical thinking from a terrified child who never got help. Understanding didn't make what she'd done to me okay. But it made it make sense. I spent the next 3 days buried in the library's microfiche drawers pulling weather records. September 3rd, 40 years ago, severe thunderstorm warnings all day, gusts up to 50 miles per hour. The paper had run a caution the day before, telling people to avoid lakes and rivers. Uncle James died during a so-called 100-year storm, with waterspouts recorded on the lake. Igor's drowning happened amid flash flood conditions that killed 3 other people that same weekend. I built a spreadsheet, dates, weather, warning levels, and the pattern screamed at me. Every single death lined up with authorities begging people to stay away from the water. I made a simple chart, attached the weather documentation, and wrote an email to Paul, Amy, and Jake, just the facts. No editorializing, no heat. If they could see the data, maybe they'd understand. Then I started another document, a family water safety memo. Real useful stuff: everyone learns to swim, life jackets aren't optional for kids, never swim alone, check weather, assign a sober adult as water watcher. I framed it as honoring Greta, James, and Igor by preventing future tragedies, not by policing laundry choices. Monday morning, as I reviewed the memo, my phone buzzed. A wall of text from Mom, typos, fury, panic. She'd heard about my weather research, probably from Grandma. She warned that if I sent my lies to one more relative, she'd cut me off, change her will, block me everywhere, tell the family I was dead to her. The words sliced deeper than I expected. I typed back that I loved her and my door would be open when she was ready to get help. Then I blocked her number. I needed quiet to heal. I sent the safety memo to Paul first. He replied within an hour. It all tracked. He'd been thinking the same things. Amy texted that afternoon. She'd help push real safety at family events. Jake called that evening and admitted he'd spent his childhood scanning outfits instead of hazards, terrified at every lakeside gathering. Paul confessed he'd always thought the white rule was bizarre, but when he questioned it at 12, his mom slapped him. We agreed we'd be the change. The next morning my phone flashed Sienna. I almost let it ring out. She never calls me. Her voice was smaller than I've ever heard it. She apologized for years of sniping about my clothes. Every September, she panicked about what people wore and dumped it on me because I didn't seem to care. She hadn't taken a bath since she was 5, only quick showers, and hadn't swum since childhood. Then she asked if we could take swimming lessons together. I stood there speechless with my toothbrush in hand. Sienna, the queen of snark, asking to be swim buddies. But she sounded real. Exhausted. Done with fear. I said yes. We booked our first lesson for Saturday and planned to meet Paul and Amy at the coffee shop near the community center afterward. Jake came with his girlfriend, who'd watched our family drama from the outside and brought perspective we needed. The 5 of us grabbed a corner table. Paul opened a notebook like we were launching a startup. Amy suggested rotating water watchers at gatherings, not to check clothing but to actually watch the water. Jake's girlfriend offered to design laminated cards with signs of real drowning, because it doesn't look like the movies. We divvied up responsibilities. Paul would monitor weather, Amy would manage life jackets, Jake would ensure sober supervision. It felt eerie to plan without half the family, but productive for once. As we sipped our coffees, Jake said something that floored me. Uncle Ted's brother had questioned the white clothes myth for years. He'd brought water safety research to a family meeting a decade ago and got shouted down so viciously he moved to Oregon. Jake's girlfriend added that her mom went to school with Uncle James and remembered him as a reckless heavy drinker. Paul nodded. Apparently at least 6 relatives had privately expressed doubts over the years, but were too scared of Mom and Aunt Paige to speak. Even Uncle Ted once suggested swim lessons for all the kids and got shut down because the family decided avoiding white was protection enough. 3 days later, I was choosing cereal when Aunt Paige appeared at the end of the aisle like a storm front. She marched over, voice loud enough to turn heads. She accused me of destroying our family and spitting on the graves of children. I kept my voice level. Teaching kids to swim honors them more than checking outfit colors. She called me heartless, said I'd cursed us all. Phones came out, people stared. I said plainly, Greta drowned because no one was watching, not because of a dress. Her hand twitched like she might slap me, then she registered the audience, spun around and stormed off, shoulder-checking a cracker display on her way. That week in therapy, we prepped for eventual contact with Mom. My therapist set 2 chairs facing each other and I played both parts. As Mom, I spoke her fear and fury out loud. Hearing it with my voice made it feel almost human. As myself, I practiced staying steady, setting boundaries, saying I loved her, refusing to re-enter the superstition. We walked through. What if she cries? What if she yells? What if she threatens to hurt herself? The answer was always the same. I can't control Mom. I can only choose my response. We ended by naming what I was grieving, the mother-daughter relationship I might never have if she stayed anchored to the myth. Afterward, I met Paul and his girlfriend for sandwiches. She's a social worker who specializes in family trauma. She offered to facilitate if Mom ever wanted mediation and explained how she'd seen grief calcify into rules that get passed down like heirlooms. She handed me her card. I thanked her, honestly unsure Mom would ever agree. That weekend I started a project I'd been imagining since those photos surfaced. I bought a quality album and began curating pictures of Greta, Uncle James, and Igor, images that showed their lives, not their deaths. I found Greta's kindergarten photo in Grandma's old albums. Uncle James was everywhere, laughing, strumming a guitar. Igor's baby pictures hurt to look at, but I included them. Beneath each photo I wrote something gentle. Greta loved butterflies. James played in a band. Igor's first word was dog. At therapy, I brought the album. My therapist turned the pages slowly and said I was reframing them as whole people. We talked about when to show Mom, maybe later if she started therapy herself. The photo of Greta in different outfits from the same day, she said, might help crack the myth. Time got strange, some days syrup slow, others gone in a blink. 3 months after Labor Day, just when I'd accepted Mom might never bend, my phone lit up with her name. Her text was long, messy, full of typos. Nightmares. Panic attacks. Her doctor had given her anxiety meds and told her to seek therapy for the root cause. She wanted to meet, with Paul's girlfriend as mediator. My hands shook as I typed yes and sent the contact info. The support group had become my anchor. After one meeting, the leader pulled me aside. She ran workshops on complicated grief and family myths and asked if I'd share my story. She said hearing from someone mid-journey helps more than a slideshow. I agreed. It could be practice for my own family if they ever chose to really listen. 2 weeks of prep later, Sienna and I were 10 swim lessons in, still clumsy, still proud. During backstroke drills, she blurted an idea, a proper memorial for Greta, James, and Igor. Not a dirge, something useful. Buy the water, yes, but with safety demos and life jacket donations for families who couldn't afford them. We could honor them by keeping other people alive. The idea clicked into place like a seatbelt. A few days after, a small package arrived, no return address but Grandma's handwriting on the label. Inside, a worn locket with Greta's photo, the metal softened by decades of touch. Her note said she was too old and tired to change her beliefs, but she knew I was trying to help. She asked me to remember Greta as a child who loved butterflies and dancing, not a cautionary tale. The last line made me cry. Maybe I was brave enough to save our family from itself. The next week Sienna called. Let's do the memorial. I drove to her place and we spent 3 hours on the phone. Water safety organizations agreed to send instructors. We booked the community pool for a Saturday afternoon and made a Facebook event that talked about education and remembrance, no mention of clothing or curses. Paul set up donation boxes for life jackets. Memorial Day, I got there early to help set tables around the shallow end. Around 20 relatives showed, far more than I expected. Lifeguards demonstrated rescues while everyone stood on deck wearing bright orange life jackets we'd bought in bulk. Sienna read water safety stats, heads nodded. Jake brought photos of the 3 we'd lost, birthday parties, school plays, normal life. People smiled. They told stories I'd never heard. No one said white. No one said Labor Day. No one said curse. 2 days later the mediator called. Mom wanted to meet, if I was willing. I went to the downtown office. Mom was already there in the conference room, looking smaller than I remembered, twisting her wedding ring. The mediator reviewed the ground rules: respect, listening, no interruptions. Mom spoke first. She said she'd been thinking about everything and, maybe the clothing thing wasn't completely real. But she couldn't just turn off 40 years of believing. The mediator nodded and asked what not completely real meant in practice, what she could let go of, what she needed help unlearning, and how we'd keep each other safe while we figured it out. And for the first time it felt like we might be stepping carefully toward the shore. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. I walked into therapy like I was clocking in for a shift at the Boundary Factory. My therapist had me rehearse actual scripts, word for word, for when relatives tried to guilt me or pick a fight. We ran through scenes like we were staging a play, what I'd say if someone accused me of disrespecting the dead, what I'd say if they begged me to just stop talking about it, what I'd say if they exploded. Same calm tone. Same steady pace. She kept repeating, you don't manage their reactions, you manage your response. We mapped out how to keep relationships alive with the people who were open to change, and how to guard my peace from the ones who weren't. Her homework? Pour my energy into the relatives who'd reached out with support, and give the rest time and distance. The next week she nudged me toward a grief support group. I almost turned around in the community center parking lot, but the leader met me at the door and made the room feel soft around the edges. People went around sharing and a pattern unfolded. After a loss, families invent rules like scaffolding around a crumbling building. One woman said her family banned swimming forever after her uncle drowned. Now the kids were afraid of bathtubs. A guy said birthdays vanished after his sister died at a party. Cake Day became a Memorial Day. Another couple talked about relatives who refused highways after a crash, adding hours to every trip because the back roads felt safer. The leader said those rules are a way to pretend we can control random tragedy. Hearing strangers describe my family with different details made me feel less weird, less alone. Meanwhile, Rita's sister had been spelunking through court records and turned up a bombshell about Igor. She handed me a manila folder, a civil settlement between my parents and the pool owner's insurance company. The pool had no fence. No shallow end markers. The teen lifeguard was texting instead of watching the water. My parents got a $100,000 settlement 8 years ago and never said a word. The papers screamed negligence, nothing about white swim trunks. That afternoon, a shaky handwritten envelope arrived from Grandma, no return address. Inside, a short note saying she couldn't talk about Greta but understood I needed answers. Tucked behind it was a photo from that Labor Day. My breath caught. Greta's dress was white, with pink flowers. Not the solid white that's been gospel in our family lore. My hands trembled so hard I dropped the picture. I snapped a photo on my phone and slid the original back into the envelope like it might crumble. Monday, I dragged myself to work on fumes. My coworker asked if I was okay. I muttered something about family stuff and kept walking. 10 minutes later, my boss called me in, shut the door, and gave me the face. Then she said Mom had been calling the office every day since the barbecue, sometimes 3 or 4 times, asking if I was suicidal or in the middle of a breakdown. The receptionist started screening her, but Mom kept swapping numbers. HR wanted documentation that I was stable or they'd have to put me on leave. Heat crawled up my neck. I pulled out my phone and showed texts confirming my therapy sessions and that I was not in crisis. My boss made copies, said HR would block Mom's number, and offered to flex my schedule so I didn't burn sick time for therapy. I thanked her and went back to my desk where spreadsheets blurred into gray static. By Thursday, my therapist had a new plan. She said the hospital fiasco carved a fresh, twitchy fear of water into me. She wasn't wrong. I tensed by the office water cooler and avoided the bathroom because the flush sounded like a wave chasing my ankles. Exposure therapy, baby. We started at the park across from her office, where a fountain launched water 10 feet into the air. We sat 20 feet away while I breathed through the urge to bolt. Every few minutes, I scooted 5 feet closer. Eventually, I sat on the edge with cool mist kissing my face. It felt silly and like I'd wrestled back a square inch of my life. The next session, I put my hand in the fountain and counted to 30. After that, we sat in the bleachers at the community pool and watched kindergartners splashing through swim lessons. By week 3, I could stand at the pool's edge without my heart sprinting a marathon. Rita was a literal lifeline, daily check-ins, surprise dinners when I forgot to eat. One Saturday she asked if I wanted to go somewhere. Pine Lake. The drive was quiet. The parking lot was almost empty, summer had rolled up and left town. We walked to the dock. It was narrow, maybe 3 feet wide, with gaps between the planks big enough to swallow a small foot. No fence. No rope. Nothing between wood and dark water. I stood there for 20 minutes staring into the green and thinking about an aunt I never got to meet. Rita didn't push. I whispered, "Bye Greta," and promised I'd help heal the family the right way. On the ride back, Rita mentioned her mom had old photos stashed away, and she'd been digitizing them. Turns out there was a whole album from that Labor Day 40 years ago. Her mom was friends with my grandmother and photographed everything. She emailed me 15 pictures that night. Most were adults with beers and kids sprinting past with hot dogs. One shot, midday judging by the shadows, showed Greta in blue shorts and a striped shirt, holding a paper plate near the picnic table. Another, likely mid-afternoon, showed her in the same outfit, laughing with other kids. So she changed clothes at some point. The myth about showing off her white dress all day wasn't history, it was a story. My anger cooled into something heavier. Mom was 8. A child told to keep an eye on a 6-year-old while adults played cards and drank. Greta drowned and Mom carried 40 years of blame like a stone in her pocket. The white rule wasn't about safety. It was about control. If she could police color after Labor Day, maybe no one else would disappear. Magical thinking from a terrified child who never got help. It didn't make what she did to me okay, but it made it make sense. I spent 3 days swimming in microfiche at the library. Weather records, September 3rd, 40 years ago, severe thunderstorm warnings all day, wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. The paper ran a warning the day before, stay away from lakes and rivers. Uncle James died during a 100-year storm with waterspouts recorded on the lake. Igor drowned amid flash flood conditions that killed 3 other people that same weekend. I built a spreadsheet, dates, weather, warnings, and the pattern shouted, every death happened while authorities begged people to stay out of the water. I made a simple chart, attached the weather docs and emailed Paul, Amy, and Jake, no commentary, just evidence. Then I drafted something else, a family water safety memo. Real rules, everyone learns to swim, life jackets aren't optional for kids, nobody swims alone, check weather, assign a sober adult as water watcher. I framed it as honoring Greta, James, and Igor by preventing new tragedies, not policing wardrobes. Monday morning as I polished the memo my phone lit up. A wall of text from Mom, typos, rage, panic. Someone, probably Grandma, had told her I was circulating research. She said if I sent my lies to one more relative, she'd cut me off, change her will, block me everywhere, tell the family I was dead to her. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I texted back that I loved her and my door would be open when she was ready for help. Then I blocked her number. I needed quiet to breathe. I sent the memo to Paul first. He replied within an hour, it all made sense, he'd been thinking the same. Amy agreed to champion safety at gatherings. Jake called that night and confessed he'd spent childhood barbecues scanning outfits instead of hazards. Paul admitted he'd questioned the rule at 12 and got slapped for it. We decided we'd be the change. The next morning, Sienna flashed on my screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Her voice was small. She apologized for years of jabs about my clothes, said every September she spiraled and took it out on me because I didn't seem scared enough. She hadn't taken a bath since she was 5, only quick showers, and hadn't swum since she was a kid. Then she asked if we could take swim lessons together. I stood there, toothbrush in hand, stunned. Sienna, the snark queen, asking to be my swim buddy. But she sounded exhausted. Real. I said yes. We booked our first lesson for Saturday and met Paul and Amy afterward at the coffee shop near the community center. Jake came with his girlfriend, who had the outsider's clarity we needed. We grabbed a corner table and drew up an actual plan. Amy proposed rotating water watch shifts at gatherings, someone sober, eyes on the water, whistle and rescue pole nearby. Jake's girlfriend offered to design laminated cards with real signs of drowning, because it's quiet, not flailing like the movies. We split responsibilities, Paul, weather monitoring. Amy, life jackets. Jake, sober supervision. It felt weird planning without half the family, but also like progress wasn't waiting for permission. Midweek, Jake said something that floored me. Uncle Ted's brother had questioned the white rule for years. 10 years ago, he brought water safety research to a family meeting and got shouted down so hard he moved to Oregon. Jake's girlfriend added that her mom knew Uncle James from school, said he was a reckless heavy drinker. Paul nodded. At least 6 relatives had privately doubted the rule, but fear of Mom and Aunt Paige shut their mouths. Even Uncle Ted once suggested swim lessons for all the kids, shot down because no white was apparently protection enough. 3 days later, I was choosing cereal when Aunt Paige charged down the aisle like a tornado. She accused me loudly of destroying the family and spitting on children's graves. I kept my voice low. Teaching kids to swim honors them more than checking clothing. She said I'd cursed us all. Phones came out. Some shoppers stared, some looked away. I said, plain and steady, Greta drowned because no one was watching. Not because of a dress. Her hand twitched like she might slap me. Then she noticed the cameras, turned on her heel and clipped a cracker display on her way out. That week in therapy we practiced for Mom. 2 chairs. I played both parts. As Mom, I spoke her fear and fury out loud, it made it feel human-sized. As me, I practiced staying steady. I love you, these are my boundaries, I won't return to superstition. What if she cries? What if she yells? What if she threatens to hurt herself? The therapist asked. The answer never changed, I can't control Mom. I can only choose my response. We spent the last 20 minutes naming grief, the mother-daughter relationship I might never have if she stayed married to the myth. Afterward, I met Paul and his girlfriend for sandwiches. She's a social worker in family trauma and offered mediation if Mom ever wanted it. She's helped families dismantle rules born from grief. She handed me her card and told me to call anytime. That weekend, I started a project that felt right in my bones. I bought a good photo album and began curating pictures of Greta, Uncle James, and Igor that showed their lives, not their deaths. Greta's kindergarten portrait from Grandma's albums. James laughing, guitar in hand. Igor's baby photos, those hurt, but I included them. I wrote gentle notes under each. Greta loved butterflies. James played in a band. Igor's first word, dog. I brought the album to therapy. My therapist said I was giving them back their humanity. We talked about when to share it with Mom, maybe after more therapy. The side-by-side photos of Greta in different outfits from the same day might loosen the story's grip. Time stretched and snapped both at once. 3 months after the mediation, Mom texted asking for lunch, just us. I picked a quiet spot downtown. She looked better, color in her cheeks, hands steady. She said she'd started seeing a therapist who specializes in childhood trauma and survivor's guilt. They were separating real memories from the story she built around Greta. She didn't apologize for the hospital, but she admitted her fear had taken the wheel that day. She asked for monthly coffee dates with clear boundaries. I agreed as long as clothes and water stayed off limits for now. She accepted. She even smiled. 2 weeks later, Grandma called a meeting at her house. Almost everyone came, even the relatives who'd ghosted since Labor Day. She stood in the living room holding the same photo she'd mailed me and said it was time to retire the white clothing rule. She didn't say it was wrong, she said it had served its purpose, and now there were real safety measures in place. Relief rippled through the room. Uncle Ted's brother muttered something about tempting fate, but Grandma kept her gaze forward. She wanted great-grandchildren learning to swim, families enjoying water safely. Meanwhile, Sienna and I had been grinding through lessons, 2 a week for 3 months. We could do all 4 strokes without panicking now. My butterfly looked like an angry moth, but still. Our instructor said we'd be good candidates for water safety instructor certification. We signed up on the spot. 6 weeks of evening classes later, we both passed. The community center gave us Saturday afternoons for classes. We put up flyers and posted in local Facebook groups. 12 people showed up the first day, Paul and his girlfriend, 2 cousins who'd been quietly supportive, and a handful of locals. We started with back floats in the shallow end, watching people's faces unclench as they realized we weren't tossing anyone into the deep end. Sienna handled waivers and equipment, I demoed skills and did slow laps around the deck, spotting anyone who looked uneasy. Halfway through, an older woman cried because she managed a 10-second float. She hadn't touched water since her grandson's accident 3 years ago. We extended class by 30 minutes so everyone could practice more. Afterward, Paul helped us stack kickboards and pool noodles. My phone buzzed, Mom. Proud of you for teaching safety. No mention of coming to watch, but still. That same week, our family group chat changed its name from Family Emergency Alerts to Family News and Plans when Amy posted a photo from her daughter's soccer game. Suddenly there were recipes, birthday reminders, normal chatter. Jake dropped a beach picture where he was very clearly wearing white board shorts, and no one said a word. The chat felt lighter. Like a room with windows. As August slid into September, my stomach tightened at the thought of Labor Day. Even with breathing exercises and coping strategies, I kept bracing for old ghosts. The plan, a barbecue at Grandma's. But the group chat looked different this year, actual safety logistics. Paul volunteered to be the sober pool watcher. Ted rented temporary fencing. Dozens of messages about food assignments and setup. Not one about clothing. I chose a floral sundress with white flowers, my small stress test for all of us. The morning of, I drove to Grandma's with only a slight tremor in my hands. The temporary fence was already around the pool. Jake set up a table with life jackets in every size right by the gate. Kids tore around in bright orange vests, and their parents looked relaxed instead of hovering. Interesting conversation happening here. I wonder what they're really thinking. Paul waved from a chair beside the pool, whistle and rescue pole within reach, taking his role seriously. The food tables were safely far from water. Multiple adults had signed up for pool watch shifts. Mom arrived an hour later. She gave my dress a little nod and didn't comment. She stuck by the food tables with Aunt Paige, talking quietly. Every so often I caught her glancing at me with something like acceptance. More family trickled in. No clothing inspections. Ted's nephew wore a white polo. Amy's daughter had a white sundress like mine. Conversations drifted toward work, school, vacations. Kids splashed under steady supervision while adults rotated safety duty without making it a production. Laminated safety rules hung by the gate. The younger kids had buddy bracelets. Around 3, I passed a cluster of relatives chatting about vacation plans instead of September water doom. The whole atmosphere felt unlike any gathering I could remember, lighter but safer. Grandma sat in her chair with a small smile, calling kids over for hugs. No tears. No speeches about the past. As the sun slid down, people drifted toward the seating area. Paul kept his post by the now empty pool. Grandma stood up and suggested we share happy memories of Greta, James, and Igor. People actually smiled. Stories rolled out, Greta's butterfly drawings, James's terrible jokes, Igor's dinosaur roars. Mom surprised everyone by describing how Greta would whirl around the living room in her butterfly wings until she got dizzy and giggled herself to the floor. She cried while she said it, but she was smiling too. Aunt Paige squeezed her hand. Even the quiet relatives spoke up, little moments, not eulogies. The sky went peach and pink. No one said drowning. No one said clothes. That night after I got home, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom made me sit down. You were brave to break the cycle. Therapy is helping me see things differently. I love you. The first I love you in months. I screenshotted it and saved it everywhere. Not a full apology. But real. The next morning I opened my journal and poured out 2 hours of words. This Labor Day was nothing like last year's chaos. We had real safety measures instead of superstition. People were healing, even if some relationships still had sharp edges. The journey was awful and expensive, and I lost some relatives to the myth. But sitting there, pen in hand, I felt genuinely okay with where we'd landed. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.